Hi, Mark. Namaskar.
Hi, Dr. M. Nice to see you again.
Namaskar. Welcome back.
Thank you.
We are doing the third episode with you, the fifth episode on the series. I don't have to introduce you. You are in the lifelong inducted into Hall of Fames of Shigo Shingo Academy. You're the architect of Danaher business system, and also the pioneer in lean accounting, and a proud owner, consultant, etc. I can add a lot of adjectives to that, of Lean Horizon Consulting. I got a question for you, and I never told you this. Okay. We consider you, with all your fame and glory and all your experience, as an expert. But you refuse to be called an expert, and you always say that you're a student, you're a learner, you're a lifelong learner. Now, I sync with you on that, and I mean, I know that's what takes me on as a lifelong learner. But then, why do you refuse to be called an expert?
Well, I guess when you think about lean and the whole concept of continuous improvement and the fact that we are always trying to reach for perfection, right? When you say you're an expert, it kind of gives the indication that you think you've arrived. Okay, you've arrived at a level and there's nothing else to learn, right? Everybody has to kind of just listen to what I have to say. And believe it or not, and please don't tell my wife this, I've been wrong at times, okay? I don't know everything. And every time I've changed my thinking on a lot of things. As a matter of fact, one of the things I changed my thinking on is that of certifications. When we were developing the Danaher business system, I put in a Danaher business system certification process, which I believe still exists today. I wish I never did that. And I'll tell you why, because certifications to me almost are like, there's nothing wrong with learning on those certifications, but you know, it almost says like you've kind of arrived. And I'll tell you a story. I was at a client, and it was an award-winning plant. I won't tell you what the award was. Okay, there's a bunch of them out there. You know, there's AME, there's Shingo, there's Industry Week. There's all kinds of different awards that people compete for with their factories, or if you will, right? Get the world's best factory type of thing. So he had me go to this place. I want you to go to my best plant, and I want you to go through. Now, it was a very good plant. Don't get me wrong. It was beautiful. A lot of good stuff. But there were a lot of things there to be desired, right? So I got back in the conference room, and the president and his team all sat there, and they said, well, Mark, what's your feedback? And I complimented them, of course, but I said, hey, here's some areas that I think you need to kind of look at, right? I listed them out. And this is how I see things, right? And they got a little upset that there was any kind of criticism, okay? So the president went into his office and says, hold on for a minute. And he comes back out and he takes the award and he puts it on the desk. He says, now talk to me. And I looked at him and I said, let's just call him John. John, it looks like you've arrived. You've done it all. There's nothing else for you to do, right? I got up and I left. Where are you going? There's really nothing here I can help you with. Because the first thing that has to change is your mind, not your factory, okay? You've already arrived. You've done it. You've hit the holy grail, okay? There's nothing I could do for you. Sorry, I can't improve on perfection. So
you know what, Mark, I'll tell you, when people tell me they have implemented lean, they have implemented Toyota production system, they implemented theory of constraint. Now the word implemented grammatically is past perfect.
Chuck, I did it. Check box. Yep.
It's past perfect grammatically. It's done and dusted, as you have said, arrived. And then we say lean is continuous. Continuous improvement process is supposed to be continuous, supposed to be continual. And therefore, grammatically, it has to be present continuous and not past perfect.
Exactly.
So what is said is perfect. Thank
Okay,
you.
well, I guess we're going to get going.
Sure.
And,
Here I share my screen so that I,
Yeah, Dr. Adam, I'm going to share my screen right
introduce
now.
you.
Give me 1 second here to do all the math on this, and let's get going. And I want to make sure you could see this. Can you see the screen?
Yes, I can.
Okay, good. All right. Well, first of all, again, Dr. M, thank you for having me on your show, on your Vodcast.
You're welcome. You're welcome. We've got
I have a lot of fun.
more episodes to go.
Yeah, we have a few more to go. We'll talk about that later. A lot of good ones coming up. So anyway, I really do appreciate being here, and it's a lot of fun to spread the word, and at least my learnings and also my mistakes. I made a couple in my time, and so I was asked to put. So one day I was asked to talk about process, and I never, Dr. M, I never did put a presentation together on my thinking about process, right? And we all talk about process. So I said, well, I'm going to come up with the rules I have for a process. And when I did this, it came out to 10. It wasn't contrived. It came out to 10. And it almost looks like I know what I'm doing because it came out to a perfect 10. Maybe it should have came out to some odd number like that means 14 points, but mine came out to 10. I could probably add 5 more to this, but I thought these are the key ones here that I thought I'd talk about. So here we are, right? We're here talking about my thoughts about how I think about a process, okay?
So Mark, we would be talking about, and you will tell us what according to you is a process, and then you'll tell us the 10 rules, and then we'll do a hensai to understand what has been our, what's our takeaways, or what are the lessons that we learned, or whatever the way you would like to present it, so that that would be, under summarizing everything that you want to tell us.
Absolutely. Yeah, so let's get
Let's
into
hear
it.
you, Mark. Let's hear you. Uninterrupted. Let's hear you.
No, please interrupt with questions. That'd be great. By the way, I'm getting over a cold. A couple of days ago, I couldn't even talk for 2 days. And my wife was really happy about that. But I am getting a little bit hoarse, but I'm okay. I think this is going to be fine. So maybe the practice will do me good. So what is a process, Dr. M? This is kind of a definition. There's probably others out there right now, right? But it's a systemic series of activities directed towards causing an end result. Okay, so it's a series of steps, a series of activities that has at least one output, okay? And a process, a lot of people like to think about a process as a factory, right? A manufacturing process. A process could be anything, right? It could be how you change your tire on your car. It could be how you fill out a form, or even the fact that you're using a form in the respect of a process. Services, information, there's processes everywhere we look, no matter what we do. Now, this is a little bit of a deviation here, but maybe I'll talk about this a little bit later about quality. But one thing I want to say is quality is such an important thing. And sometimes it doesn't really get the attention it needs, or we don't think about quality the way we should think about quality. And I challenge companies all the time to think about their definition of a defect. And of course, the first thing people think about is a defect is product related, right? And you get the engineering thinking behind defects. It didn't meet the spec, whatever, right? It was rejected, it was rework, it was scrap, it was warranty. But if you broaden your definition of a defect, it would be, at least my definition of a defect would be anytime a product or a service or piece of information get stuck in the process because it's wrong. There's something wrong about it. I put the wrong account number down on a form. Now it's got to be reworked. It's got to be corrected. Okay. I put the wrong component in a product. I put a blue one and it should have been red. I gave the wrong specs to operations. So I have to write an engineering change order. I just got through with a client talking to them about thinking about an engineering change order as a defect. And let's Pareto those ECOs and find out, why are we writing engineering change orders? That's a defect. And what's happening is we seem to internalize defects. Like ECOs are not just kind of how we do business, without really thinking about the fact that an ECO is a defect, right? When I went to a call center, matter of fact, this was one of Larry Cope's businesses back at Danaher, technical call center. They wanted to get better at answering phone calls. They wanted to have people on hold less time, less hangups, less frustration in that regard. And I basically said to them, well, have you ever thought about looking at the fact that somebody is calling you as a defect? Otherwise, they're not calling you, telling you that your product is great and it worked well. They're calling you because they have a problem. So you almost got to think about the fact that the technical call center is basically a rework operation that we should conceptually at least try to eliminate. So how do we define a defect in our business? We have to broaden our thinking around that. But that thinking has to be in the context of a process, right? So I'll go to my first rule of a process and say that if it's not yes, Dr. M?
Yeah, so what I hear you saying is process is a series of activity that comes and ends up as an event, and that you call it the end result, which is an event that happens. So the series of activities, and the muda, mura, and muri are there in the activities. Am I right in interpreting you right there?
Absolutely, yes. And I would even say that a process itself can be defined as waste. Okay, so for example, if we want to institutionalize rework, we can get really good at rework. We can put standard work in. We can do all kinds of great stuff with rework, but we shouldn't be doing rework at all. So even a process in and of itself, by itself, could be defined as a defect, right? So if you think about it that way.
As a matter of fact, when Teiichi Ohno, when he came up with the 7 mudas, one of the mudas were muda of over processing or wrong process.
Yeah, well, over processing, that's a hard one for a lot of people to understand. That one there is when you do something, let's say to a product in this case, when you do something to a product that if you did it right the first time, you wouldn't have to do it, that process. Okay, so in other words, I like to use the word deburring. If you're machining a part and it has a burr, who created that burr? I remember talking to Kao about this all the time. He was a world's tooling expert. How do we create the geometry on a tool where it doesn't create a burr? And why do we have to have a deburring process at all? So that's over processing. That's waste from processing, right?
Yep.
So we should not have to do these things that, and I remember going to one of our acquisitions and they created this whole church with a big sign that said deburring. Okay, it was beautiful. I mean, nice cage, machines, 5S, tape, the whole thing, right? And I looked at it and it was almost like, I felt like praying to it because it was such a nice part of the shop that they created. They institutionalized deburring. So the first thing I said to the CEO and to the head of operations, I said, I want you to get a red paint. And I want you to paint this whole cage red. And they said, well, why? I said, well, red is the international color for defects and for abnormalities, actually. Well, what do you mean? I said, well, you guys are thinking about this as something you just institutionalized waste. What's your plan to eliminate deburring altogether? Of course, they didn't have one. So it's a whole thought process around why how do you think about your business? How do you think about your life? Things that you do every day that may just be waste, and you don't even think about that they're waste because you haven't given it that kind of outside thought, you know. So waste from processing is one of those that there was one that I worked on. One of my first clients, they made SMAW-Ds, which is a shoulder-mounted assault weapon disposable. It's like a bazooka. I would call it a bazooka, and the engineers would get mad at me. It's not a bazooka, you know, but it would shoot one rocket out, and then the military guy would just throw it out, right? Well, at the end of the line, when we first started working with them in batch, when they were in batch, they had a touch-up operation. So an operator was at the end of the line with a green can of paint, and she would touch up all the scratches on it. Well, who made the scratches? Not the supplier. They had these things in a thing, they were hitting each other, or they went through the batch process. When I took them into one-piece flow, they never got marked up. So we eliminated that process altogether, right? So again, they institutionalized that rework operation with this lady sitting there with a can of paint all day and looking for scratches. And I joked around with them because I said, can you imagine this? You're in the middle of a war, you're in the middle of a battle, and the Marine picks up the thing and it has a scratch on it. He says, I can't use this. It's got a scratch on it. I'm not going to use this. You know, wouldn't happen. But anyway.
Sorry for the detour. I think I took you over to over processing, but it's quite a learning experience for me. Like, for example, you have something called mending in a textiles industry. So you make a mistake and then you mend it. So let's get into your principles.
No, but these are good ways to think. You know, what I really want to try to do is have people think, because defects are tied into this, right? And I'll talk about quality a little bit later. But I want to make sure that people think differently about what they've accepted as normal in their business, right? And that's what we're talking about. So the first rule is pretty simple. You don't even have to worry about the other 9 if you can't do this one. If you don't have your process documented, it's not a process, period. You know, I kind of joke around. I say, you know, well, if you can't email it to me, then forget it. I remember talking to some sales executives, and we talked about the fact that we made a lot of improvements with quality and on-time delivery and lead time. How are we selling that now? How can we get value out of that in the marketplace that we're better than the other guys and grow the business? Do your guys know how to value sell? And the VP of sales said, oh yeah, we're professional sales guys. We know how to value sell. Really? I said, well, show me the process that you use to teach them. Well, we just know. We just know how to do it. What do you mean you just know how to do it? You've got 50 sales guys out there. You mean tell me they all are working off the same sheet of music in their minds? First of all, how do you even know that all 50 know this, right? So he didn't have a process. So from a cost value perspective, he didn't have a cost value process documented that he could teach them to make sure they're all on the same page, and also other people that would come in as well. So my view on this is, if you haven't documented your process, you can't. I don't allow people to call it a process. As simple as that. Now, how do you do that? There's all kinds of ways to document different processes. You know, we've got, you know, down on the bottom on each one of these slides, you're going to see some suggestions of things that you might want to think about using to do that. Value stream mapping, process mapping, job instructions, all kinds of stuff that you could think about, but no documentation, no process. Stop right here, end the video. Okay. Second, it would be nice if you could visibly, now you can't do this for every process, I understand that, but the most critical processes, right? It would be nice if you could visibly display your process, because it's nice to see it when it's in somebody's head, or if it's in a computer or in somebody's book up on a shelf. Sometimes it just doesn't make a lot of sense to, it's not useful. So visibly displaying your process has a lot of benefits to it. The obvious ones, of course, but the other one is, geez, is that really how that works? Well, you know what? Sometimes it doesn't really work that way. Sometimes it works when it goes that way. That's an exception, and it happens, you know. So you start going into these kind of conversations, and all of a sudden, before you know it, your process isn't as clear as you think it is, because there's a lot of tribal knowledge that glues together all these little boxes that are on here, okay, that is in somebody's head. Nobody knows. I remember moving a plant from, I can't remember where, from Cleveland to Rhode Island, or I can't remember what, and everything was documented. However, the receiving plant couldn't make the product because there's all kinds of tribal knowledge that wasn't documented. So we actually hired a couple of ladies who really knew the process to be consultants to work with us for 6 months to not only train our operators, but to document all that tribal knowledge. You know, on Tuesday afternoon when it's snowing out and the sun's shining, you do it this way. On Wednesday, if the coffee maker doesn't work, then we got to do it this way. All this tribal knowledge was in their heads. Even though they had it documented, it still wasn't really documented to the degree that it talked to the variation in the process, right? Which of course wasn't documented. So that variation became more of a second set of procedures that were in people's heads that wasn't documented, right? Because the process itself wasn't robust, had a lot of exceptions. But bottom line is, visibly displaying it is helpful in so many different ways, especially when you're trying to teach somebody new, communicate it, or improve it, right? Okay, and again, we've got some tools down there that you might want to think about. It's not the complete set, but just some suggestions, okay?
Yeah, Mark, when I draw the standard combinations in standard worksheets, etc., I normally put a video into it. Okay, so it helps, you know, when you look at the chart and you can switch on the video, you can see visually how it is done. And it's very good for apprentices who comes as a learning experience when they see the standard work combination sheet and they see the video along with it. They make it visual and it becomes a training tool too. Thank you for making it to suggesting that.
Well, you know, it's a really good comment because so I used to work for Lego in my early career, and everybody I think is familiar with Lego, the Lego toys. Yeah. And if you ever look at their instructions, there's no words. There are just pictures. Yeah. And we actually do a visual management exercise, Dr. M, that you'd be interested in. So we usually will take the top leader in a like a boot camp or a Kaizen and put them up in front of the room, and then take an operator. We would give the operator a visual set of instructions as to how to take a bunch of Lego and create like a little boat or something like that, or some kind of car. We give the same bricks, Lego bricks, to the executive, but it's all words. And it says, take a 2x4 yellow brick and attach it to the end of a 4x2 blue brick, and make sure it's, you know, and the person with the visual instructions gets done like in 2 minutes. After 2 minutes, he's got like 3 bricks together and they're wrong anyway. Okay. Can't do it with the words. Okay. So to your point, the video is phenomenal. It's even better than pictures, right? And so now one other point I want to make about what you said is that when you do standard work, behind it is job instructions. Okay.
Yes.
So
yes, sir.
Job instructions are a lot more detailed. And that's where I like to see the videos and the pictures.
Yes.
Because, you know, on a standard work combination, it might say assemble part 20 seconds, but there might be 4 or 5 key things that have to happen to assemble a part. And that's where my job instructions come into place, which kind of follow the standard work combination sheet, right? So
that's right.
I'm glad you brought that up. 3. Here we are. Job instructions. Okay.
We just talked about it, and here you are. Rule 2, rule 3.
Here we are, right? We have to make sure that we get detailed so that not only can we train, but we can assure that the standard operating procedures are being followed, right? So if they're not being followed, then obviously you're going to have quality problems. You're going to have all kinds of issues, right? And again, to your point, where possible, visual documentation is preferred over written. Videos to me are phenomenal. That's great. It's a great way to learn. I just had to use a video the other day to change the batteries on my automatic shades. Okay, we have these shades with remote control, and it's a new home. I've been in this house for a year. I never had these shades before, so I didn't know how to change the battery. I didn't have the instructions to the thing. So I went on YouTube. And guess what? I found out how to change the batteries. It may sound simple, right? But the batteries are hidden in a little bar up on top behind everything. I didn't even know where they were. But the video was so helpful just for me to see it. It was simple. If you had explained that to me in a written form, probably wouldn't have been as good, right? Yes.
Mark, when we are working in a multicultural, multi-language Gamba and the operators, this is for the operators. So the written, like when I work in Kaula Hospital in Muscat or in Saudi Arabia, I ensure that it is, and we have got a lot of communities, a lot of people coming from various places. So we write in the language that is known to the operators, written and scripted that is known to the operators. I think that's what we meant by this, right?
Yeah, I think that's excellent. And it's interesting though, you mentioned videos, right? That's your eyes are your universal language, right? So you don't need language then.
You don't require. Thank you very much. Yes, you don't require. You can see it.
Right. So yeah, and a lot of places language is a problem, or is a factor, I should say. I wouldn't say it's a problem, but I would say it's something you got to deal with. So I worked in a lot of plants where there's a lot of multilingual type cultures that work in the plant, whether it's Vietnamese or whether it's Chinese, or up at Jake Break, where I first started my lean career in 1987, we had a United Nations up there. We had Jamaicans, we had Puerto Ricans, we had Greek, Portuguese, Italian. Boy, it was a melting pot. It really was. And so English in a lot of cases was their second language, right? Mm. So we had to kind of deal with that to some degree. So
we had the fourth one, yeah.
How many times have you done a process and you document it, you throw it in the shelf in a book or some computer file somewhere? Well, we didn't train anybody.
They don't even put versions. They don't say version 1, version 2, version 3, and it's in a soft copy in the computer.
Right. And we don't train people. And so we don't train them. And we also, and I'll tell you one of the mistakes I made. So back at Jake, when I negotiated the UAW contract, we got rid of 75 job classifications. We went to 7 skill blocks, and we paid everybody to learn a skill block. So a skill block could have been assembly. It could have been machining. It could have been all of our operations were broken out into 7 key skill blocks. And the whole idea was, excuse me, we wanted to pay for knowledge. So not based on seniority. So we actually negotiated, and I was able to convince the union to actually, this is UAW, to actually base seniority on skill blocks, not years. So if you had 2 skill blocks in 20 years, and I had 5 years, but 3 skill blocks, I could bump you because I had more skill blocks. And now we pay people to get a skill block, okay? So many cents per hour if you got a skill block, and if you got all 7, you got that too, plus a kicker on top of it. Now you became a multi-skilled operator. Here's the mistake that we made and that I made. We did not keep up the training certification. Okay, so in other words, if I trained you on CNC machining and you checked the box and you passed the test and all that, and you got trained and you got that in your pay, then you went back to another job that you never did machining for another 6 months. You lost that skill set because you didn't use it. So we didn't do a good job on getting people retrained or making sure that we rotated people enough so that they had experience in those jobs. Okay. So in one way, you can argue that we we did all the great work on getting a multi-skill workforce, but we didn't utilize it we did utilize it, but we didn't utilize it to the extent where if I had done it right, we would not have to have had retraining because people would have rotated into different roles. Okay, different work sequences within the standard work.
I
Okay,
understand.
so that was a miss on our, and the union, we had a little union issues with it too, but that's not really not an excuse. We didn't do a great job at that. So one of the things I would say to you is that when you do the initial training, don't think people got it. Don't think that, oh, I trained them back in January. They should have known because I trained them back in January. Don't assume they got it. Okay, you've got to continue to monitor, and this is where KPIs, I'm going to talk about that in a minute, come in place and all that to make sure your people are trained and refreshed on the training.
Yeah.
Okay, now one of the things I'm a big proponent of is the people who, I really do think, Dr. M, that if you have to train something, you got to know 10 times more about it than the people you're training. Okay, so I really do believe that. And so sometimes it's good to take, let's say, even operators and have them train other operators. And you monitor, make sure you know the process because you may not know it, but make sure somebody who's knowledgeable audits that person who's doing the training. Okay, to make sure they're communicating the right things. But that's a good way to get it ingrained, right? Because when you really have to train it, now some people don't want to get up in front of a group and train and all that. Okay, I got all that. But, for the most part, if you have to train something, you really do have to know it. I hate to say it. I never agreed with the notion that, those who do, and those who teach, those who can't do, teach. I don't believe that. Because in order to really teach what I'm talking about, tacit knowledge, not explicit knowledge. So a lot of things that we see out there today, people teach explicit knowledge, but they don't teach the know-how, right? And that's where the value comes in, I think, right? So keep that in mind as you go through. But training people is key. And then another rule, and this comes right out of the book of Toyota, my friend Steven Spear, who wrote the DNA of the Toyota production system, is that a clear and direct path in the process with no ambiguities. Okay, so if whether it's a product or service, I know who my customer is. I know that when I get this document done, first of all, I got to assure the quality, which is another rule later. I got to assure the quality, but I know this document's going to Dr. M now, and I got to make sure that when I pass, it's very clear it goes to Dr. M. It doesn't go to somebody that maybe is going to pick it up. It's very clear path as to where this is going to go, or the product, or the service, right? It's very clear who the customer is and what the outcome and where it's going to go next, right? So it can't be left to confusion on this. It's got to be a very clear, direct path. All right. It can't be one of those, well, sometimes it goes here, sometimes it goes there. Well, once in a while we put it over there. Well, why do you do that? Well, because we just do. You see a lot of that especially when you do value stream mapping, and you start finding out that the people that run the process don't even know what the process is supposed to do. And they argue about it, right?
Mark, when you say customer, you are including the internal customers too, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So that's a good clarification. I'm sorry I didn't be clear on that. When I talk about the customer, it's the next person in line in the process. It could be the guy sitting right next to me, right? Could be you over in India. Maybe I'm going to provide you well, right now you're my customer because I'm providing you this service. So I know it's very clear that Dr. M today at 8:00 here in Arizona, although I was a little late, we're going to deliver this presentation to you, right? So it could be an internal customer or it could be the end user, right? It doesn't matter. Customer to me could be anybody who's receiving the product or service that's next in line in the process.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's rule number 5.
And by the way, we don't always think about internal people as being our customers. And answering that question, who's your customer, is a very hard thing to do, because think about an accountant, for example, is people who get a paycheck, are they customers? Yeah.
Yes.
How about the vendors who get paid? They're, in a way, they're customers, right? How about the reporting that we do, that we report, management reporting and financial reporting? Those people are customers. If you're a
Yes.
public company, the street, the stock exchange, they're public customers. Stockholders are the board of directors. So who's your customer, right? Everybody has a customer, and everybody has a boss, no matter who you are. Okay. And so sometimes that boss is invisible because it's the big guy, right? But with me, it happens to be my wife after 41 years.
That seems to be a universal phenomena. So we need not talk about it. We experience it. We experience it. We don't have to talk about it.
Exactly. But so you got to really sit down and say, who are my customers? And then you have to ask yourself the question, how am I servicing that customer? Or those customers, I should say. How am I servicing them in terms of quality, delivery? Am I being best, cost efficient doing this? And of course, safety is always tops of the list of everything that we do. We would never want to do anything in regard to compromising on that. So sometimes they're not an easy answer. Like in the tool group at Danaher, just go one example, when we sold the Sears Craftsman hand tools. Yeah, the customer was Sears. But what about the person who buys the tools? Or how about for Father's Day when a child buys a tool set for his father? Is that child the customer, or the wife, let's say? Is she the customer? Because Father's Day was a big season for us next to Christmas. So, yeah, of course, the guy that's going to use the tools, or whoever's going to use the tools, is the customer, right? So there's a lot of customers in the chain, and not all those customers have consistent wants, if you will.
Yeah.
Sometimes they conflict. Okay. And okay, getting back to quality, like I talked about earlier, assuring the quality before you pass it on. Again, product or service. I've got a client right now who, matter of fact, several clients, taking the order from the customer has a lot to be desired in terms of being accurate. And now, once this goes through procurement and it gets through engineering specs and designs get made, only to find out that part A don't fit into part B. Why? Because we didn't get the right spec from the customer. Okay. So then you say, well, the customer gave me the wrong spec. No, you didn't understand the customer requirements. You're the expert. And it's how, if you're more interested in taking the order so you can get your commission, but not, you should be also measured on the quality of the order, because that's where your lead time starts building up, right?
So we'll talk in depth on this, isn't it? And I would love to hear more on this when we talk about cost of poor quality, COPQ. You're doing
yeah, we're gonna talk about that in another podcast. But these are the kind of things, Dr. M, that go into COPQ. A lot of people talk about cost of poor quality as rework or warranty and stuff like that, right? Scrap or whatever, defects. But they're not talking about all of the stuff that happens that should not have to happen if we did it right the first time. Okay. So in other words, again, I'm going back to that rework thing I talked about with the bazooka, with the paint. We institutionalize all this rework as just normal business. I'm expecting the fact that the order is going to be wrong. So I've got now this great ECO system, this engineering change order system, to handle those problems. Not thinking that the ECO, and I might want to try to improve the ECO system, but what I should really be doing is getting rid of darn ECOs, right? That mindset's got to shift, right? So assuring, if we can really assure the quality. Now, what does this mean? Sometimes that means I have to inspect it. That's not as optimal to building the quality in where I can't make a mistake. So we'll talk about that when we go to COPQ, Okioka Jidoka, right? But inspecting is better than not doing anything at all, and letting something go, not knowing that the quality of that product or service is right. So we know inspection is not 100%. I mean, I always say to people, hi, we 100% inspected that. Well, then why do you still have defects? Why did you pass the defects? Because if you're, in this case, a manufacturing process can't be 100%, what makes you think you're good enough to have a 100% inspection process? Okay. I mean, think about that, right? So otherwise you should have zero defects, zero, right? And you don't, so there's something to be desired there. I remember I was in Germany with a client, and there was a bunch of engineers standing around at dinner, at cocktails before dinner. And I just threw a bomb into the middle of them and sat back and listened to them. I said, hey guys, they had quality guys there, engineering, design guys, all kinds of guys, manufacturing. I said, hey guys, do you think inspection is value added or non-value added? And I just sat back and listened. Okay. You would not believe the dialogue. It was fun to listen. I wish I recorded it, Oh, there are those on one camp that say it's value added. The other side, they're saying it's not, it was really, really interesting to hear how people think. And I threw it out on LinkedIn at one time too. I think I got 50 or 60 comments about people's perspective on this, So the quality is key. Now, while we're on quality, I'll just say this, a little bit of a deviation here, but I tend to do that. Our Japanese senseis, Nakao, Iwata, those guys could not understand how it was that we were infatuated with Six Sigma. Why do you think 3.4 parts, they asked me, per million is good? Why is that your goal? Why isn't your goal 0? Now, when I posted this on LinkedIn a while back, everybody came back to me, and all the engineering types in particular, and they said, you don't understand, Mark, you can't possibly get 0 defects. And they gave me all the engineering reasons why. Okay. So my only comment to that was, well, the fact that you don't think you can get it is the reason why you're right. Okay. I mean, that's why you're right. You're not going to get 0 defects with that mentality. Okay. But I remember Iwata saying to me, DeLuzio said 3.4 parts. Why not 0? No defects, right? Why are you planning 98% on-time delivery? Which customers are you going to call right now and let them know you're going to be late? Why aren't you planning 100%? Now people say, well, if you force us, it's disrespectful to expect us to do 100. Well, it's disrespectful for you to think that you're going to fail. Okay. I'm not saying that would be your compensated goal, but as a mindset, why would you plan for 90% on-time delivery when you're at 70? Why would you plan on that? It's more of an attitude, Dr. M, than it is an accounting goal or a compensation goal, and it's philosophical, I know, but this stuff was really important to our Japanese senseis. And the more I thought about it over the years, it made a lot of sense. Why are you planning on failing? By the way, in my book, Flatlined, I think I talk about the fact that I did the math. If you take the number of air flights a day, and if they operated at 6 Sigma, 3.4 parts per million, we would have a crash every 3 days in the world somewhere. Every 3 days, we'd have a crash. So in some cases, 6 Sigma is not really, and then people say to me, well, we don't make cars. You got to understand, Mark. Yeah, I know. You make a ballpoint pen, so much more complex than a car. Yeah, okay. I mean, so, it's a mindset, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
All right. So we'll talk more about quality, of course, when we get into the quality thing, but I thought I'd deviate here and just kind of talk about that.
No problem at all. I love this because being in the pharma industry, can you imagine that you pick up that out of million capsules that you have, you got 3.4 defective ones and you can swallow one of them?
They wish they were that good. Seriously. You want to talk about quality in the United States, at least the math that I've looked at, and it's probably understated. Today, we will lose 1,400 people in medical screw-ups. 1,400 today will be lost. Okay, it's close to 500,000. It's probably more because there's a lot that aren't accounted for, but it's been documented that we lose 100,000 a year to infections in hospitals, and another 300,000 to 400,000 of just medical mess ups, prescriptions, all kinds of things, right? Misdiagnosis. And we probably all have personal stories. Every time I talk to somebody about this, they have an uncle or a mother or somebody who was subjected to a medical screw up that cost their lives. Okay. And the fact of the matter is we do not, and this is why, and again, I'm going to deviate, but I get upset when I see healthcare examples that say we improved the throughput in an MRI department. Well, that's great. Okay. I'd rather have the patient wait 5 days for their appointment in the waiting room than kill one person. Nobody's working on killing people. The medical industry kills more people. And I know there's a lot of great people in the medical industry and they do a lot of great things, but we kill needlessly more people in that industry than all the armies combined together in the world. Okay. So it's a mess and it's got to be looked at. And, one of the things that we don't, if an airplane crashes with 200 people on it, it gets all kinds of news. But today, Uncle Joe in Miami died, and Aunt Mary in Seattle died, and little Bobby died in Kansas, and so you don't get that mass, set of deaths, and it gets covered up, okay, and it gets covered up, and it just kind of like melts into the woodwork of all these errors that kill people. It's a big deal. And so when I see people talk about healthcare and talk to me about productivity and throughput and profitability and patient experience, the patients that they're not asking about to get that data are dead. You can't ask a dead guy how he feels about his experience. And so it really upsets me when we put delivery and cost ahead of quality and safety. It really does.
I understand that, yes.
Okay, so I'm passionate about that because it's ignored, and the people that are supposed to handle it are somewhat, in my opinion, arrogant. And I know I'm being editorializing here, but it's they get offended when you bring it up. It's like, wow, excuse me. Anyway, sorry, I deviated.
No problem.
You can see I'm passionate about that. This is one here that, of the 7 that you talked about earlier, Dr. M, waiting to me is such a big, big waste in anything we do, right? And if you just analyze whether it's a product, a document, a service, a recruiting process to hire somebody, I don't care what. If you analyze the reasons why you wait or something waits, you will find the answers to the kingdom. I can guarantee you. This might have been my experience. Okay.
Yes,
and by the way, a lot of times it does have to do with quality. Okay. But a lot of times it has to do with standard work, improper loading to tack time. It could be doing a batch and queue type of thing. That type of thing. So, I just had this conversation with a client the other day about engineering and engineering drawings. Why can't we flow engineering? So if I gave a design engineer 4 projects to work on, I'm building in lead time. How am I doing that? Well, while the engineer's working on project number 1, project 2, 3, and 4 are sitting on his desk waiting. Then nothing's happening to him. Okay. So if I don't think about engineering as a flow, just like I would manufacturing, okay, then I'm building in lead time. And then maybe you say, well, how come it takes 48 months to develop a simple product? Well, that's one of the reasons why. Okay, so there's other reasons too, but you think about waiting. If you just look at why is that waiting? Why is that waiting? Right? How do we take that time down? Right? To be able to, a lot of times it's just poor management of resources. Not really thinking about tack time. I'll give you a real life example. I just went and I'm trying to put a wine cellar into my home. And I went to a designer and a builder of wine cellars. the refrigerated wine cellar with the racks and the glass and the lights and all that stuff. And I went in there and the guy asked me what I did for a living. So whenever a layman asks me that, I just say this. Look, I said, you ever order furniture? The guy says, yeah. I said, well, now it's 12 weeks. It used to be 8. Now with COVID, it's 12. So it takes 12 weeks to make that chair. How many hours do you think it takes to make that chair? Oh, I don't know, a couple, 3, 4 hours. Okay. Let's just say it takes a day. Why does it take 12 weeks? And by the way, it's not all transportation either. Why does it take 12 weeks? That wait time. So I said, what I try to do is bring that 12 weeks as close to that one day as possible. That's what I do.
Understand.
And how I do that is I look at all the wastes associated with the process. Now, one of the big wastes is this waiting, right? It's one of the 7. And so this is a big deal, all right? And so when we think about a process, we have to think about if we can flow the process. I don't care if it's a document, accounts payable, order entry, purchase orders. I don't care what it is. Can we flow the process? So down below, you see the golden rule here. You first try to flow, pull where you can't flow, and never push, right? So whenever something piles up, it's not good, right? So we want to flow it.
Yeah.
I remember, in manufacturing one time, we were teaching one-piece flow to a new team. And one of the operators said to me, Mark, I can do 12 at a time. Oh, you can? Okay. Well, show me how you do that, right? Yeah, it's one-piece flow. It's not going to work. I can do 12 at a time. Okay. He takes me out. He lines up 12 parts and he starts working on one of them. I said, wait, stop. He goes, what do you mean? You said you can do all 12 at once. You're only working on the first one. Well, I'm going to work on the second one. Yeah, but when you work on the second one, the other 11 are waiting. Well, you can't work on all 12 at once, So he built in waiting. So now I've got to wait for all 12 of those to be done before it goes to the next process, as opposed to doing one and handing it off and getting a drop-off rate of whatever that is, okay? So waiting is a big deal. And one of my rules is look for the waiting, because you will find all kinds of goodies to go after with Kaizen, okay? Relate.
Yes.
Here we go, okay? So speaking of Kaizen, I guess I'm a pretty good straight man. So Kaizen means, Kai means change and Zen for the better, right? So continuous improvement. Whatever you do today, you can do better tomorrow. I came up with a saying at Danaher that to me, Kaizen is a healthy dissatisfaction with the status quo. No matter what I'm doing today, I could do better tomorrow. I'm going to celebrate on Friday, be happy with the changes that I made and the improvements I made. When I come in back on Monday, though, I'm going to be a little more aggressive to say, okay, I still know there's more, right? I still know there's something better here, right? And so it's Kaizen is an attitude, all right?
Yep.
Now, of course, it's an event as well, okay? But
Yes.
Kaizen is an attitude. And no matter how good you think you are, that's why I don't like this expert thing, right? This expert title. No matter how good you think you are, if you don't think you can get better, and if you think you've arrived, then you just lost the game, no matter how good you are. You look at some of the great sports figures of the world, and I'll just pick on USA here, baseball, basketball. Michael Jordan, one of the greatest basketball players, if not the greatest of all time, he practiced more than anybody. And people would say, well, geez, why does Michael Jordan need to practice at all? Well, maybe that's why he's the greatest, okay? Because he's passionate about what he does. He puts time into his trade. And that's why Michael Jordan was the greatest, okay? Now, of course, he had a lot of raw talent, don't get me wrong. But just because you can't rely on raw talent, you have to practice. You have to continue to learn and continue to evolve, all right? So this is a real key. Whatever process you set up, it is now framed up for you to make improvements on a priority basis, okay? Now, getting a little bit into strategy deployment, which I know you and I are going to do down the line, right? I like to think that once you get strategy deployment set up in your business, and those are your breakthrough objectives, a good portion, let's say I put 70%, whatever percent we're going to use, is to work most of your Kaizen initiatives on that, and the rest on what I call daily management. Okay. And I'll get into that in strategy deployment in a lot more detail if you're not sure what that means.
Yes.
But you and I'm not sure when that's scheduled, but that's down the line in a couple of weeks.
Yep.
So Kaizen's a really big thing. You can't just set up a process and leave it alone. Now, of course, you got to look at it on a priority basis, because, I'm not going to spend a lot of time Kaizen in how I open mail in the mailroom. I'm not saying it shouldn't be done. All I'm saying is that that's not a priority for me strategically, right? So that's the kind of thing we have to think about on a priority basis. How are we going to look at this? I mentioned earlier, now, once you put this in, you have to monitor your process, what we call key performance indicators. Okay. And key performance indicators are your key to make sure it's performing the way it needs to perform. Are people adhering to the process? Maybe the process is a bad process, not giving you the outcomes it needs to give you. And knowing the difference on a KPI, key performance indicator, of a leading versus a lagging indicator. So here, I just give an example down below.
Yeah.
A lagging indicator looks backwards. It says, okay, how many safety accidents do we have in the factory? That's looking backwards. Okay, I had, 14.
That's the rear mirror. That's the rear
Rear
mirror you're
mirror.
looking at. Yeah.
Now, how about a predictive, something that's going to affect
Yes.
the future outcome of that measure? How am I measuring how many people were in PPE? Safety glasses, safety shoes, okay, that type of thing.
That's interesting. Yes.
You see what I'm saying? So,
Yep.
So a lot of times we measure what happened and then try to do root cause without trying to be proactive to assure that the right things are happening to prevent a bad lagging indicator, okay,
Yep.
if you will, right? So that's what we're looking at there. Matter of fact, that example came from my friend Colleen Sepulsa. She gave me that exact example. I've had other examples, but when she gave me that one, I kind of like that one. I like that one a lot, and that's why I used it here. So,
Yep.
And rule 10, apply the Deming cycle. I do know now from you, Dr. M, from your association with the Deming family, that Dr. Deming did, in fact, like to say plan, do, check, study, in reference to his mentor, Schuhart. So I have it here, plan, do, check, act. But basically, we have to continue to monitor through KPIs and then go back and do the countermeasures.
Yeah, Mark.
Yep.
That's the remark that Diana made when your poem was passed on to her on Deming's Day on 14th of October. And she appreciated what you did. So did her son, Kevin. He went through that. And the remark that she made is, my father would have preferred to call it study. Counter looks like a checkbox. That's what she said. And
yeah, I saved your note. Yeah. So maybe I should change this, huh?
You can always, you have the seal from Diana that said, say study.
Maybe I should find the poem and show you the poem before we end here. But plan, do, check, study, act. Okay. This to me, Dr. M, is the key to lean. Okay, in my opinion. My first trip to Toyota of many in Japan, 1990. Unfortunately, the year that Tashi Ono died, so I never got to meet him. One of the senior leaders at Toyota in Toyota City told me, he said, the difference between a world-class company and a not so world-class company is their ability to solve problems. He said, every company has problems, including the great Toyota. They have problems, but we solve our problems once. Okay. A lot of people confuse firefighting and putting out the fire as problem solving, And then the problem kind of rekindles itself again a week later. And that's not root cause problem solving. So whether you're doing strategy deployment or daily management, this to me is, if somebody said, what is lean? It's about solving problems, right? It's about using all the various tools that we have. It's about putting problems to bed. And most companies don't have this muscle to do this very well. So a lot of companies have the right thought about it, but they just don't know how to do it. Okay. And so this is ever so important, because no matter what process you set up, it won't be perfect. It will have deviation, it will have variation, it will have problems with it. And through the Kaizen process, we want to continue to perfect that process and make it better as we move towards perfection, right? But if we don't have this muscle in our culture, it's not going to work, right? So I remember, and you know, when you get into this closing thought right here,
Mark.
Yes.
Mark, here's a visual indicator. No, I would like you to go to your the next slide. Here's a visual indicator. This says that I give rest to your throat while I do the hensai of the closing thought. With your permission, sir.
Go ahead.
Thank you. So here's a visual indicator that I'm going through. Hensai, number one, closing thoughts. Principles and values without supporting process are merely slogans. I repeat that. Principles and values without supporting process are merely slogans. Let's see the second hensai that I have on what we presented today. Can we have the next slide, sir? That's the second hensai. You are perfectly engineered to get results you have already gotten. Want to change the results, change the process. Mark, would you come in on this to digress a little more on this thought?
I like to joke around with companies to say that the amount of pens that you have in your desk, the amount of lines you have on in your parking lot, the amount of toilet paper you have in your men's and ladies' room, the amount of supplies in your cabinet, the amount of people that you hire, the amount of hours that you work, the amount of time you have your lights turned on, everything you're doing is perfectly engineered to result in the results that you got. Everything from a paper clip to a piece of capital, to a building, to a whatever, right? Everything you're doing is perfectly engineered. Now, some of those things that you did, you need to change. Not everything. You don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, as we say over here, right? But you've got to change something to get a different result, right? And we all know that saying, right? Insanity is defined as, who said that? Einstein, I think. You know, doing the same thing over and over again and expecting you're going to get different results. You're not going to do that. So people are perfectly engineered. That's it. Okay. It's pretty simple.
I take over.
Okay.
I like this game. I like this game. So let's have the closing thought 3. Toyota gets brilliant results with ordinary people running brilliant processes. Mark, need to know more.
Well, some people take exception with the word ordinary, because nobody's ordinary, right? But what they mean by that, I think, and this, by the way, this comes directly out of Toyota. It's not something I made up. When I say ordinary people, you don't need PhD rocket scientists to run your business. If your process, if you put it this way, if you have well-designed processes, even a consultant like me can run them effortlessly and brilliantly. Okay. So what it's really talking about is simple, direct, easy to understand, doesn't require such unbelievable tribal knowledge or skill set, but the processes are so well designed that most anybody could do it and get the right output, right? And by the way, when we talk about Toyota, a lot of people don't get this when they see it. A lot of the brilliance in their manufacturing has to do with their design process.
Yes.
Okay. Because they think about the design process, and I can get into that some other day, but they think about their design process unbelievably well in terms of the whole business, not just the design aspect of it. Very, so getting that cohesiveness, even having what we would call, at least what I call, multifunctional engineers or monolithic engineers, where design works in manufacturing, manufacturing works in design. So they have a good understanding of the whole process, right? So a lot of the brilliance that you see on the shop floor when you go on a tour in Toyota, a lot of that has to do with the way they design the product. And otherwise, how could they make a Lexus and a Camry and an Avalon right behind each other on the same line? Okay, that's brilliant. And they do it effortlessly as well. So, okay.
What's my hand sign number 4?
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Love it.
Hey, by the way, I just want to go back to one here, Dr. And before we go on, I want to give one example.
Sure.
There's a lot of examples I can give here, but people say, yeah, we all agree. Executives sit around and they say, yeah, we think that we have to drive problem solving, which is a principle of problem solving, to the lowest possible level in the organization. So that's your principle. A year later, they look, nobody's doing it. So you ask yourself the questions. Go through this list of what I just talked about today. Did you train? Do you have a process? Do you have a problem solving process? Well, kind of. Have you trained people in it? Well, guess what? Okay. So when I first took over as general manager of the Hino business, or the Asian business for Jake Brake, we had what's called the Jacobs production system at Danaher at Jake Brake. And we were getting 2 suggestions per month per employee. And we thought we were hot potatoes, right? UAW shop, by the way. I went to Hino, they were getting 9. But their 9 was implemented suggestions. Ours was not. Somebody could have said, paint the building pink, and we counted that as a suggestion, okay? Because we said, hey, we're getting involvement. That's great, right? They had 9. So I asked them how they did that, and they said, well, we have a problem-solving process. We train people, okay? We give them Friday afternoon. We take that time out of available time when we calculate our tack time, and we let them, and we give them the resources, engineering, tool room, whatever, maintenance, and they solve problems on Friday afternoon.
What I hear you say,
they actually have a process to do it.
Yeah, I mean, I like this. And thank you for getting me back into this, is because the way I hear you saying is the person who gives the suggestion also takes the onus of seeing it is implemented, and then management gives permission for him to do that, gives him time off to do that. Right, sir?
Yeah, and I'll tell you a funny story. So one of the suggestions we got was, it's too hot out here, we need air conditioning. And leadership was like, well, we all decided to move, including finance. When I was CFO, I moved my desk to the shop floor with everybody else. Art Byrne, George Koenigsegger, they all said, no, we're all moving out there, which I took the lead on doing it with my group. They didn't expect me to do it because I was in finance. So when I did it, I was surprising everybody. Nicole couldn't believe it. 'Cause I can't believe Money Man here is on the shop floor, you know? And so, but all of a sudden, the executives were on the shop floor. And for some reason, we got air conditioning. Isn't that amazing? All of a sudden, now it was important for us to get air conditioning. It wasn't important for us when we were sitting in nice, cozy offices. Okay. I thought that was pretty interesting. Just a little side story there. So
Good.
anyway.
Thank you very much, Mark. And we'll see you the next time. And next time we'll be talking about standard and standardization. And then we go on to strategy and strategy deployment, lean accounting, and cost of poor quality. We have a lot of episodes to cover. Thank you very much, Mark. And see
Boy,
you next time.
I better study up, huh?
See you next time.